Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of the Team Daddy Weekly Recap. I am your host, Shapiro the Hero, aka Daddy Dreidels. After taking a break for Thanksgiving, I am back with a recap stuffed with more goodies than last week's turkey. The playoffs are taking shape as 4 more spots have been clinched since we last spoke, with 3 playoff spots still up for grabs going into the final week of the regular season. I'll break it all down for you right after this word from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Shutterfly. It's that time of year where everybody pretends to care about everybody else and send out those holiday cards. Use Shutterfly to take care of those hard-to-please family members. With lots of different styles and formats, Shutterfly will help you get your holiday cards out quickly and affordably. Before we get into the actual recap, we do have one more bit of news to share. The Team Daddy League is getting even daddier as George and Leanna have announced that they are expecting a baby girl. A big congratulations to George and Leanna, and George officially welcomed the Team Daddy. And with that, we will start this week's recap off with George taking on Zach, who is riding a 10-game winning streak going into this potential playoff showdown. But in the end, George locks up a postseason berth with a 167.05 to 139.8 win over Zach. Joe Burrow led the way for George with 29.35 points, and George also got 24.9 points from Nico Collins. Now we know why George has been taking this year so seriously. He's got to show baby to you that her daddy actually knows what he's doing in fantasy football. On the other sideline, Zach was once again led by Lamar Jackson with 29.75 points, but ultimately falls back to earth after winning 10 straight games. Which, by the way, I really think we need to stop and just applaud Zach for that impressive win streak. Win streaks are hard to come by in any case, but to win 10 games in a row is really extraordinary. Of course, it all means nothing if you don't win at all, just ask the Moneyball Oakland's, but it's still impressive nonetheless. Either way, Zach loses for only the second time this season and will try to lock up first place next week when he takes on Brett. Meanwhile, George improves to 8-5 after back-to-back wins, locking up a playoff spot in the process. He and I will square off in week 14. As for my matchup with Brett, after a strong start on Thursday and Friday, the wheels fell off my team over the rest of the weekend as Brett picked up the victory, 168.6 to 135.2. DJ Moore led the way for Brett with 23.7 points, and Brett also got strong games from Kyron Williams and Jared Goff. However, the big story coming out of this week is that Brett will most likely be without Christian McCaffrey for the rest of the season. So even if he makes the playoffs, he'll be fighting an uphill battle from the start. But, as I always say, you just have to make it in, and anything can happen. For my team, it was Brian Robinson leading the way with 26.9 points, but outside of that, only one player on my team broke 20 points this week. Not exactly a recipe for success. With this loss, I fall to 5-8, but still hold a playoff spot for now based on points scored. I'll face George in week 14, where I can clinch a postseason berth with a win, or a loss and some help. And with his win, Brett jumps to 6-7, also currently holding on to a playoff spot. He can also clinch a win this week with a win over Zach, or a loss and some help. Turning now to a team who actually did clinch a playoff spot this week, Swans once again put up the highest scoring team as he defeated Josh 221.25 to 151.35. Brock Bowers led the way for Swans with 35.2 points, and Swans also got 33.9 points from Josh Allen. The crazy part is that Swans left Jerry Jeudy on the bench with his 54.5 points, costing Swans an extra $10 to buy Nico a new rattle. But I digress. Josh's team was led by Captain Terry McLaurin with 40.95 points, which just proves what can happen when you actually pick a captain. However, despite outscoring a third of the league, Josh drops his second game in a row, falling to 8-5 after locking up the playoff spot 2 weeks ago. He will limp to the finish line against Big John and pray for a turnaround in the postseason. Meanwhile, Swans is now also 8-5 after winning his third straight. Could the defending champ be making another late season run? He'll take on Kyle in week 14 with a playoff spot already secured. Kyle, on the flip side, has become the first team officially eliminated from playoff contention thanks to a 154.85 to 112.25 loss to Big John. Our Gentle Giant was led this week by Tua Tagovailoa with 35.85 points, and Big John also got 26.3 points from Rico Dowdle. On the other sideline, Kyle was led by Jaden Daniels with 34.7 points, but once again puts up the lowest point total of the week. Poor Kyle just can't seem to catch a break as he falls to 3-10. Thankfully for Kyle, this tough regular season will come to an end next week as he takes on his older brother to finish off the campaign. Meanwhile, Big John improves to 5-8 and plants himself firmly back into the playoff conversation. Big John will face off against Josh in Week 14, needing a win and some help to clinch a postseason berth. Turning now to the new hottest team in the league, our Menti has quietly won 7 games in a row after taking down PJ 168 to 164.55. Captain Joe Mixon led the scoring for Armenti with 40.35 points, and Armenti also got 30.5 points from Bijan Robinson. However, Armenti missed out on $10 by benching Russell Wilson, but seeing as you've already beaten yourself up over that, I'll just let it go. However, PJ did take home that $10 prize for having the week's highest scoring player, thanks to Captain Bucky fucking Irving and his 48.75 points. Too bad it wasn't enough for the commish to steal a win. PJ is now 5-8 and hanging on to that last playoff spot based on points scored. He will take on Jed in the regular season finale, needing a win to lock up a playoff spot, as long as Big John doesn't outscore him by 76 points. For Armenti, he improves to 10-3 on the season and can take over first place with a win over Steve, a loss by Zach, and a wide enough point scoring margin. Speaking of Steve, our final matchup of the week saw good old Cheesy Baby picking up his 3rd straight win, this week defeating Jed 156.15 to 137.45. Captain Brian Thomas led the way for Steve with 28.05 points, and Steve also got 25.7 points from Jordan Love. After trading away McCaffrey, Mahomes, and both Tampa Bay backs, Steve has played spoiler over the last 3 weeks, picking up a few wins that throw a wrench into everybody's plans. And a team that once seemed destined for the toilet bowl is technically not yet eliminated from the playoffs, but we need a win and a miracle to get in. But I digress. For Jed, it was Captain Bo Nix leading the scoring with 31.65 points, but after losing 4 straight, Jed may miss out on the playoffs altogether. Now at 5-8, he will take on PJ in Week 14, with the winner almost guaranteeing themselves a playoff spot. Meanwhile, Steve is now 4-9 thanks to his recent hot streak, and he will take on Armenti in the regular season finale. Here are the Team Daddy standings as we head into the final week of the regular season. Despite the loss, Zach still holds the top spot at 11-2, followed by Armenti at 10-3. Behind them are Swans, George, and Josh, all locked into the playoffs at 8-5. Now here's where things get interesting. Brett is currently in 6th at 6-7, but could still technically miss the cut. Rounding out the playoff teams are myself and PJ at 5-8, but we are only in based on points scored. Big John is in 9th, also at 5-8, trailing PJ by just over 75.5 points. He is followed by our last 5-8 team, Jed, sitting in 10th, but Jed plays PJ this week, trailing by almost 200 points. He can still make it in with a win and either a loss by Big John or Jed outscoring Big John by 105 points. Next up, we have Steve in 11th at 4-9, followed by Kyle in the basement at 3-10. As we gear up for the final week of the regular season, there's a lot at stake. First place is still up for grabs, and we have 5 teams fighting for 3 playoff spots. This is also the final week for team captains, so this will hopefully be the last time I have to remind all you guys to get your picks into Swans and/or Brett by kickoff on Thursday night. Thank you as always for watching. This has been your Team Daddy Weekly Recap. I am your host, Shapiro the Hero, and I will see you next time. L'chaim, motherfuckers!